If you would have asked where's Mashiach, it would have been much better.
So
You just asked where's Avi. You just asked this second. You must have heard him from your house.
So we are learning Likkutei Sichot, volume 1.
This is for him, right?
The Parshas Vayeira.
This is for him, yeah.
No, the Parshas Vayeira. And let's continue a little bit more with what the Rebbe said. So yesterday we talked about the idea that you have to come to a place of being like 100 years old in order to fulfill that dream. And what does that mean? You don't have to wait until you're 100 years old. You have to live your life like what the Mishnah describes as the 100-year-old, that he doesn't see the world as a reality that stands by itself. He sees it as something that is nullified to God. Now really, we can't see that. We can't. It's impossible for us to. The way the world is right now, it's impossible for us to see. For me to look at you and see godliness, it's not. Very special.
Ani ba'ad.
So, the only person who could see that was Moshe Rabbeinu. That's called Likkutei. It's called the higher unification. The lower unification is that I look at the world and I see the world, and I remember in my mind I have a concept that this is godliness, but I don't see it. I just understand that this is what it is. So, when we say Shema, so the first pasuk is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's when you do higher unification. You're supposed to see everything that's as godliness. But of course we can't, so we cover our eyes. Because we can't say something that's not what we see. So we cover our eyes to say we acknowledge it in our mind. But then there's not much difference from the second verse, which is the Yichud Tzata, the lower unification. So one of the solutions in Chassidus to this problem, Imrei Bina is a whole book that the Middle Rebbe wrote about how to come to that in Shema. He gives all kinds of advice. One of the directions is that you switch from the ontological realm to the psychological.
To the whom's?
Yeah, big word there. The ontological realm to the psychological. We're not trying to say what the world is. Right? Ontology is like, what is the world? What is reality? So if you say it's godliness, so that's Yichudei La, but that's the higher unification. But we usually can't come to that, or can't come to that at all. So one solution is to switch to the psychological realm. So what is the higher unification in the psychological realm as opposed to in the ontological realm? So in the psychological realm, there's many answers to this. Like I said, there's a whole book on different solutions to this. One of them is, and it's one that is especially relevant to what we're talking here, is that you should come to a state where you don't need any reward from the world. If you can come to a state that you exist in order to serve, and there's no, because you exist to exist, then that is akin in the psychological realm to that everything is godliness. Why? Because what does it mean that God created the world psychologically? Psychologically, God created an other, that there is someone else apart from Him. Now, within us, we do that all the time. We have an internal other. We create a world within us all the time. What does it mean, I have an internal other? It means that I'm able to look at myself from the outside. Unfortunately, I usually use that in the wrong way. I look at myself from the outside in order to give myself a sense of satisfaction and a sense of acknowledgement of having been that I'm recognized by myself. I recognize myself. I give myself recognition. Meaning, I do something, and after I've done it, I want to take the sachar. I want to get the reward for it. So nobody's giving me sachar for, davening here this morning, or giving this class. I don't get any reward, although I could go on YouTube and see how many people watched. That's a type of recognition. So I get YouTube to do my work for me. So I look at myself from the outside using using the camera. But when I'm davening, nobody's filming, nobody cares. So what do? At the end of davening, I look at myself and I say, very nice, pat myself on the back. I davened, I prayed, I did what I was supposed to do. It says that's the internal other. And that is the same thing as when God created the world. But God didn't create the world for someone to pat him on the back. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose was for there to be an other, to be able to relate to someone else, to have that relationship. So really the reason we have an internal other is so that we can see other people. Because if we don't have an internal representation of the other, we can't relate to anyone else. We have to be able to go outside of ourselves and to see that there's something else here. Otherwise, I would feel that everything here is just me, which is pretty much what an animal feels. Right? That everything that it sees is basically just itself. But the fact that in our minds, the brain creates a consciousness where I'm separate from everything else, it can be a very positive thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It's positive because it allows me to relate to others. But we use it the wrong way. Instead of using it to relate to others, to be able to project an other, and to see you as someone separate, I project myself there, and I pat myself on the back. I use it the wrong way. So the explanation is that if I want to have higher unification, I need to get rid of the external other altogether. It's like as if there was no creation to begin with. In the psychology of the person, it means that I don't project myself outside, and I don't pat myself on the back, and I don't do any of these things that require me to have recognition and satisfaction from something on the outside. So if I get rid of that, it's as if psychologically I haven't created another world. I haven't created something outside of me. Again, and usually that was meant to be that I can relate to you. So that's a different explanation why I cover my eyes. I'm covering my eyes because I really don't want to see anyone. Because I don't want to have an internal representation of the world. I don't want that. I don't want to have an internal representation of the person who's sitting next to me. I don't want to have an internal representation of my parents, of my wife, of my children. I don't want anything. Right now, there's no world. That's the same thing as saying the world was not created. Psychologically, it's like the same thing. So what is there's only God? Doesn't mean there's only me. The mistake would be to say, so if I get rid of the external other, so there's only me the way I am here. No, there's only me in the sense that there's only God. There's nothing else, and not me. Okay? God is not me, it's not the same thing. But I get rid of the whole thing. So that's an interesting solution to this. Why is it so interesting? Because if you want to be able to fulfill this childhood wish that you had, you have to work without expecting a reward. And again, to not expect reward is to be in higher unification, and it's to be able to work for the sake of work, for the sake of serving, for the sake of fulfilling my mission in life. If you can get rid of that, you become absolutely unstoppable. Because the thing that stops people always is the friction they receive from their need to receive recognition, reward, satisfaction, whatever it is, from the outside. If you can get rid of it, in a certain sense, people would call this being locked into yourself. It's true. At the level of do I need a reward or not? No, I don't need anyone to recognize what I do. I need to work. Where's my joy? My joy is in the work itself. My joy is in what I'm doing itself. Because that is important enough, because that's why my soul came down into the world. If it's really my dream, so this is what I want to do. And I don't care if it'll take 100 years, like in the case of Avram. Actually it took a lot longer in the end for him to fulfill his dream. But it could take many generations. But my thinking is, I'm working for the sake of fulfilling my purpose in the world, not for the sake of receiving a reward. So that's called higher unification. You can't be like that all the time, but you need to be like that a few times a day. Like in Shema, we say that twice. We can't be all day long in a state of I don't need any satisfaction, I don't need any reward. Alavai, you should be that way, but normally people can't. But you should at least reset yourself twice a day to this state. Okay.
Can you explain that on a physiological level? Because
no, I don't think anybody knows how in the world the brain does this.
People need dopamine, and if you can function without dopamine, where do you get your motivation from?
From the joy of being you.
And that will create its own dopamine?
Right. It's the greatest dopamine. It's dopamine that can last forever. theoretically. You don't need it more than twice a day. When you reset that way, I do this at least 6-7 times a day. And I do it because I feel like my energy goes down, and I need to go check and see if I have email, which is another way of getting satisfaction from the outside. Somebody recognizes me, somebody knows I'm alive. I go check how many people, I don't know, watched this and wrote about that, and all this stuff. And it's a sense of importance. It gives you a sense of being a central figure in the world. And when I feel that I'm doing that, so the way to stop it is, okay, cover my eyes and say Shema. And go into the state that I don't need anything else except for being who I am. I exist to serve. I exist to work. I exist to be who I am, to become who I am. And that releases, in my opinion, it releases a lot of something, because I feel refreshed right after that, and I can go for another few hours. And so keep doing it.
So when you feel the need, when you feel the urge, when you feel the dopamine is going low and you feel the urge to eat something, check email,
right.
so before
you do that,
that's your indicator.
Right.
That's to reset for
right.
a minute or so.
The moment I reach for my cell phone, it's like, instead of reaching, I do this. Sometimes it doesn't know. I don't always catch myself. Sometimes, it's so.
So what's the sentence to say?
Shema Yisrael. The kavanah is what's important.
So what's the
what you experience. I want to send you a meditation on it. One of the things I did do was that meditation for how do you come to a state where there's only God. So that's the meditation on the inside. I cover my eyes, and that's what I feel. There's only Hashem. But psychologically, what it means is that there's the joy in the being itself. You don't need anything beyond that. In a certain sense, in the East, they try to reach that all the time. They want to be, nirvana is basically that state. Except by them...
You aim for nothing and they get nowhere.
Right. It's to be nothing. And that's a big mistake there. Okay, anyway. So let's see what he says here. When this incident took place, on number 3, section 3, the Rashab was merely a small child who had not yet reached the age of education, and yet he was crying, demanding that Hashem reveal himself to him. We see from here that every single Jew, regardless of where he stands spiritually, can demand to see Hashem. So again, we said the Rebbe is going to take this now in a sort of a different direction, but it all aligns along the same lines. We'll see why. He may not yet have even reached a level of education. This means that not only might he be unable to understand godliness that is Torah on his own, but he is not even able to internalize it when taught by others. Obviously, age is not the main factor here, but rather a spiritual level. The Frierdiker Rebbe would say that the Jew's age is not calculated by what it says on his passport, but rather by the level of spirituality that he has attained. Even a Jew on a beginner's level is able to demand a revelation of godliness with emotion that actually brings them to tears. Tears expresses the emotions one feels towards a concept or idea that goes beyond his understanding, whereby he becomes totally united with the concept as a result of being passionate about it. For that reason, we talked about this, the tears are considered to be the residue left over from the mind. That what the mind cannot contain comes out as tears. Furthermore, we see from the story that a person is able to demand a revelation of godliness that is similar to the manner in which Hashem revealed himself to Avram after he had given himself a bris, a circumcision. We find that Hashem had previously revealed himself to Avram before he had fulfilled the mitzvah of Milah, but the revelation at that earlier time was on a lower level. So we talked about how this presented itself in Avram's real thrust in life, which was to make converts, and that he was dreaming of from the time of his early childhood, from when he was 4 or 5 years old. Okay, so I'm skipping to 5. There is also a valuable lesson to be learned from the answer of the Tzemach Tzedek. When a Jew, a tzaddik, and the answer was, when a Jew, a tzaddik, decides at 99 years of age that he must circumcise himself, he is worthy that Hashem should reveal himself to him. Although it is true that every single Jew is able to demand to see revelations of godliness, such a request still requires a certain awareness as a precondition. That is, a person must recognize that although he may have great potential, or may have even already have reached remarkable spiritual heights, he still has more to work on, he still must circumcise himself. Okay, so now he gets into this. This is what we've been discussing, that potentially every single Jew has great powers and the ability to attain the highest levels of spirituality. As it says, every single Jew must ask himself, When will my actions reach the level of the actions of my forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? We talked about Pascal's law of fluids. It is just a matter of bringing that potential into action. Last night I was talking to a group of girls, and I asked them, what did you cry about when you were 4 or 5 years old? So almost all of them had the same answer: dolls. Right? It's like they told them, what did you cry to your parents about that you really, really wanted and you didn't have? They said the only thing they can remember is that they cried about dolls. So I asked them, what do you think that represents? Like psychologically, like analyze yourself. What do you think that represents? So one of them came up with it pretty quickly. He said it represents children. I said, right. So that's like ingrained from early childhood. Like when we say that a girl plays with dolls, she doesn't play with dolls because there's something unique in her appreciation of dolls versus fire trucks. No, what's unique is her soul. Her soul wants to be a mother.
Don't you know that's one of the biggest complaints of the ultra left?
Yeah, I know.
That say you mustn't give a girl a doll to hold,
right?
Because you're indoctrinating her to play a role as a mother, which is wrong. You know.
But here you see that naturally they cry about this. Why? Because the soul is crying, this is what I want. So the thing you have to buy girls the most is dolls. Especially the little baby dolls. They also have this thing of, like Barbie dressing up, and that's also part of being a woman. But the one that they really cry about is the baby dolls. Even a tzaddik who, like Avram, has gained complete control over every single part of himself, even over the parts which a person is unable to control naturally, must realize that there is still plenty to accomplish. So this is classic the Rebbe, because the Rebbe will always push into everything that you have plenty more still to do. There is a story told about the Rebbe Rashav that illustrates this idea of having complete control over one's body. Once, when he was complaining that he wasn't able to hear from one ear, so he had different physiological problems. His main complaint his whole life was his left hand. From about age 20, 18, something like that, he had a real issue with his left hand, and he would become numb, and he wouldn't be able to feel it. He was able to move it, but he wasn't able to feel it. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling if you've ever had something like this. That you can move and you can do everything you want with the hand. Like motorically it's fine, but you can't feel it. And over time it drives you nuts. Especially if you're writing. I don't know, he wrote with his right hand. So I don't know what he did with his left, but it could be. Right. 2 letters at the same time with both hands. No, it's not. They said that about the Tzemach Tzedek. But it could be that he also wrote with both hands. When he got tired with one, he would switch to the other. That's the Rebbe, that's the Tzemach Tzedek. He was the Rayatz, you said. Yeah. That could be it. I've never heard about the Rashab.
But he said that he was unable to hold a conversation when he would do that.
Okay. So once he was complaining that he wasn't able to hear from one ear. Now look at this. This is classic Freud. Very interesting. In an attempt to identify the cause, it was discovered that when the Rebbe Rashab was saying Chassidus on Shabbos, there were people in an adjoining room who were talking and disturbing it. So the Rebbe Rashab knew that his mission was to spread Chassidus. So in order to continue the mimer without being disturbed, he removed his ability to hear from that ear that was facing the adjoining room and carried on with the mimer. So it's not suppression, it's not repression, it's suppression. There's something negative, I don't want it in my life, so I don't repress it. Repress it is unconsciously I do it. But suppression, I suppress it on purpose. I don't want this to bother me. I don't want this to get in the way. It's a classic thing that even Freud knew. If the repression is done without my knowledge, it becomes a defense mechanism. And one day, the defense mechanism stops working. And when it comes back, it brings back, when it stops working, it brings back all the reasons why it was there in the first place. And suddenly you feel it. Because until now, it's been protecting you from seeing this. That's if it's a repression. But a suppression means that I do this consciously. So I am dealing with it. I'm just dealing with it by saying I don't want to hear it.
It's a switch off.
Okay? But how many people can do that for what they hear? Right? for what they hear. How many people can do that? They can switch off their hearing.
Nobody.
No. So he says it is possible. Naturally, it is impossible for one to stop hearing out of one of his ears through his own will. That's what he said. However, we see from the story that tzaddikim can have full control over their entire bodies, even to stop themselves from hearing from one ear. That even people on such a high level must be aware that there is still that which remains to be circumcised. So now we're at almost the end. Even a person who has reached great spiritual heights must continuously work to remove the most insignificant negativity that still resides within him. For although the fault may seem small and insignificant, eventually it may develop into something harmful. This is why the Tzemach Tzedek pointed out that Avram was 99 years old and still took it upon himself to have a bris. He doesn't say God commanded him. It's very interesting. He doesn't say God commanded Avram to circumcise himself. It says Avram felt that he should circumcise himself. That's a switch. Avram did it because Hashem commanded him. He says no. Hashem commanded him, but there was no Torah yet. So it wasn't clear. So he went to ask his friends, should I, shouldn't I? He had to make a decision in the end. And he felt in the end that this was a good thing for him. That he should do this. So the number 100 represents completion and perfection, when each of the 10 character traits that form a person have been refined to their fullest extent. 99 represents a person who has almost reached that level of perfection but is only lacking one minute element. Even a person who is almost perfect and requires only the slightest spiritual refinement must work to remove all coarseness, however minute it may be. This is a different explanation from the one that we gave when we were learning. We said that 100 is to be able to see the world as if it doesn't exist. We talked about that today again. Every person is able to make the same demand the Rebbe Rashab did as a small child, as long as he has the humility to recognize that he must constantly try to improve his spiritual state and never be satisfied with the level he has attained. Through this, he becomes worthy of a revelation of Hashem, and he too becomes a ruler of all his limbs, even those which one usually cannot naturally control. Furthermore, so basically what he's saying is to control means to have a revelation of Hashem translates as being able to control everything. It's a very interesting thing. There was a movie called, I don't remember what it was called. I read the Luc Besson, whatever his name is, French. There's all kinds of action movies with all kinds of strange twists. So one of the things he did was called, I don't remember what it was called. It was the idea was that there's this potion that you drink, and it wakes up all your cells in your brain, and you become 100% active. Like everybody says, for some reason, I don't know why they say this. They say that only 20% or 10% of our brain is active at any time. But if everything was active, you'd be a completely different person. So the theory there is that if you become 100% active, you would have control over every single cell in your body. Every single cell. I mean, you'd be superhuman. Because the cells can control. They say, like, if even just at 30%, you'd be able to control pain. You wouldn't feel pain. You could do anything to your body, you wouldn't feel pain. At 40, 50%, you could regenerate. And then you keep going on and on and on. I don't know what it comes to anyway. But that's godliness. And it's another way of saying godliness. That's what he's saying here. That if you have a revelation of God, you have full control over your body. Everything wakes up. Everything becomes alive. Everything becomes controllable. Basically what we're saying is the fact that we have things that are autonomous, the autonomous nervous system, that works by itself, that we don't have to contribute to at all with our conscious mind, that's saying that God is in the background. If God was fully in the foreground, we would have complete free will over everything that we do. Furthermore, he will also be able to become a master over the part of the world that he is responsible for refining and elevating. So it's the same thing, just as it is in the body, it is in the world. The fact that I'm not the master of my part of the world, the part that I'm supposed to refine, to elevate, to clarify, to do birurim for, that is because I don't have a revelation of Hashem. If I did have a revelation of Hashem, or the greater the revelation of Hashem that I have, the more ability I have to control the world around me. Similarly, just as tzaddikim affect the world through their own personal service, Similarly, by working to take control over his own body, a person gains control over the world around him and is given the ability to elevate it. So this is an important example of what do you call it? The world and the person mirror each other. I can't remember what the word is. But the more control you have over yourself in your actions, the more control you have over your environment, over your world. And it's a very...
mitzvah gorer is mitzvah.
Why are you saying mitzvah gorer? Not just mitzvah.
The more you do, so the more you get the
So
robe.
what you're saying is mitzvah gorer mitzvah is you do a mitzvah with yourself, and that allows you to do a mitzvah on the outside, with the world. And that's not the usual explanation, it's a very nice, novel explanation. Right? Let's just finish this. Through properly refining and mastering his own self, he will also be able to refine the world around him, including all of the blessings which Hashem bestowed upon him, such as children, health, and money, in order to be able to serve Hashem properly. Very nice. So next week we'll be learning 3 days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and we'll meet again hopefully next Sunday.
But I'll be here Sunday.
Okay, I'll be here Sunday.
No, I won't be here Monday and Tuesday.
What? Oh, you're only going to be here Sunday, so hopefully you'll come, and then we'll continue Monday, Tuesday also.
Bezrat Hashem.
Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Shabbos.